Hey everyone, welcome to the 2021 version of Wrong End of the Snake. It's a webcast about audio, touring, and the relationships we've built between our road families. Tater and I have had an 18-year relationship on the wrong end of the snake with bands like Ted Nugent, Kid Rock, Slash, Stone Temple Pilots, Prophets of Rage, Iron Maiden, and most notably 10 years as front of house and monitor mixers for Linkin Park. My co-host, Kevin Tater McCarthy, is a world-class monitor engineer with over 30 years in the business. I'm very proud to call him my friend. He has 9 Top Dog Monitor Engineer of the Year awards and 2 Parnelli Monitor Engineer of the Year awards. I am Ken Van Druten, aka Pooch. I'm a front of house engineer with 3 decades in the music industry. I'm a 3-time Grammy-nominated recording engineer. I have 8 Top Dog Front of House Engineer of the Year awards, and I'm also a winner of the Parnelli Front of House Engineer of the Year award. Let's do a little housekeeping. Please use the chat window in the Zoom app to communicate amongst yourselves. If you're streaming from our YouTube channel and you want to be able to ask questions of our guests, register to be on the Zoom call for future episodes. Links to register are in all of our social media. If you have any questions for our guests, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom app. We will answer as many questions as possible during the hour and then answer any leftover questions in our Q&A overtime episode. Look for that to be uploaded to our YouTube channel in a few days. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to visit our social media. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is at Wrong End of the Snake. Tater, why don't you tell us about our guests this week?
All right, today we have Pete MERLUZZI. Pete started touring professionally in 1998, straight out of college as a merchandiser, which he'd been doing locally since the age around 11. We'll get into that in a little bit. As a tour accountant and tour manager, he's worked with Judas Priest, AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Slash, Heart, Katy Perry, Joe Cocker, ZZ Top, Billy Idol, tons more, list goes on. As an artist manager, he's worked with Shadow of the Thrill and Doomslide. Pete has an online pirate radio show called The Noise Factory and is currently doing voiceover work. Let's welcome a guy we like to call, due to an incident in Russia, the Merluz, Pete MERLUZZI.
I wasn't expecting the audience. That's fantastic.
How are you, Pete?
By me.
How's it going, Pete? How you doing, man?
Good, man. It's going really good. It's great to be on with you guys.
I've been watching.
I've been watching episodes since you guys started doing this, so it's man, it's still going back there. Yeah, I've been watching you guys since you started, and doing some episodes here and there, so kind of hiding in the background and just eagerly waiting my turn. I saw you had the maestro on last to wrap up the last year, the virtuoso. Mr.
Indeed, yeah, we've been lucky to have a bunch of really great musicians, and man, I mean, every guest that we've had on, we've been really lucky to have, and we're so glad that you're here.
Yeah, you know what? Speaking, I forgot to talk to Jarek about that. The old. It's because I'm a virtuoso and you're a virtuoso.
I can't believe you did bring that.
I talked to Derek about that.
You're the one that I learned that from.
Yeah, before. I know. I forgot all about it.
Yeah.
Virtuoso.
We went a whole hour with him and you didn't get to that?
I totally forgot about it. Dang it.
Come on, Tater.
Yeah.
Well, it's a new year, so maybe you can redeem yourself, after our dumpster fire of a 2020. Here we are back in it. I'm hoping that we get started, working soon. I want to get into that a little bit with you because, we're at that point where it's been like, okay, this has been, we're coming up on 9 months of, all of us not working. And so we'll kind of talk about that. But I think first, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit, Pete, and tell us where you come from, where you were born, how you got into this racket.
Wow. All right. I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. As a lot of guys in this business are from that upstate New York area kind of thing.
Home of the Lost Horizon, that's why.
Home of the Lost Horizon, right? We all knew enough to get the hell out. That was the goal. We wanted to get out of there. That's what we've been working towards. So yeah, I grew up there. My father was a deputy sheriff up there for years. And when he retired, he had been doing bootleg security part-time since the late 70s and went on the road full-time. So at 11 or 12, I actually started to sell t-shirts at shows. You know, they needed an extra vendor or something, and they dragged me along. And, you know, as a kid, you know, I used to do my paper route money, so I was good with cash at that time. And, you know, there wasn't really a lot of credit card stuff going on at that point in shows. So we were, you know, just handling $20 bills all night long, you know. And so I started doing that. I did it all through college, actually down in Miami and in West Palm Beach. And when I graduated, I wanted to be an A&R guy. That's what I was going to. I was getting a marketing degree with a music, you know, business background and minor. And in the 90s, you know, I sat there while I was in college getting my degree, basically watching the record label business collapse in on itself, you know, and I kind of watched all those jobs go away. So my love of music and just, you know, I'd been playing music since I was 8 or 9, but I was really a music, you know, a sponge, I guess, is the best way to look at it.
You're like a music aficionado. It's funny whenever Tater and I are like, you know, have a question about some obscure band or whatever, we always go, call them or lose.
Yeah, I guess I am. And I still, you know, my record collection probably will show that off now. It's gotten weirder and, you know, crazier as it's gone on. But yeah, I still love it. You know, I still love to listen to music. It takes me places. It reminds me of things. There's still songs that I put on that I remember the first time I heard them. You know, there's music that binds me to my parents, you know, and things that I would hear as a kid growing up there. And I was really lucky as a kid. I had a great uncle that had a distribution chain that would do like pool tables and cigarette machines and pinball machines and stuff like that for bars and restaurants. And we got an old Seaberg jukebox from him when I was a teenager. And my house was always kind of like the house that people came to, you know? And so the jukebox was just stacked with like, you know, oldies and then stuff that I was into, you know? So it kind of grew into this thing, and it was just became this hobby. And I still have the jukebox.
Does it still work?
It does, yeah. And it's
That's
a
awesome.
67 Seaberg. It's one of the big rectangular ones, and it's still beautiful, you know, but it's at my father's place, and I need to get it dragged over here. It's just, you know, it's 2,000 pounds of glass and steel that you gotta, you know, cart across the state. So
Next time you're cutting your next trucking deal, you might want to.
yeah, there you go. I should just call Eddie Kircher and be like, hey man, what do I do? Let's get this going, you know? But yeah, it's something I still love. And, you know, and I've had the honor of kind of, you know, I've done some managing over the years. I joke about it. It's more mismanagement because I'm really just trying to figure stuff out, you know, and help people when I can. And the first time I did that, I was, you know, I've been on the road for about, I don't know, only about 7 or 8 years. And I met John Karabi, who was a guy whose voice I loved, you know, and we knew some mutual friends. Quake, it was a mutual buddy because he had tour managed his first band, The Scream. And John and I just hit it off. And a few weeks later, he called me and he was asking me if I wanted to manage him. And I was kind of like, you know, I don't know the first thing about this. I mean, let me help you with some things and let's just go from there, you know, if you don't mind learning together. And he didn't. So, and it, you know, it's funny. We haven't worked together since 2010. And in the last 8 years, he's done all the things that we had plotted out before. So it's kind of cool. And our friendship is still tight, you know, and I love the guy to death. And, you know, he still sings great, you know, and I'm just happy to see guys like that doing well, you know, and one of the other relationships that I've had going on for a long time is with Tony Montana, who was in Great White years and years ago as a teenager, you know, came in right around the Once Bitten period. And Tony is the front man guitar player in the band Shadow and the Thrill that I've been managing for the last few years. And the record finally came out last year, I'm sorry. And, you know, I'm learning again, you know, struggling through radio, you know, how radio really works versus what they tell you it is. And, you know, just how alive and well payola is in the industry today, you know.
It is, isn't it? It's crazy that it still exists.
And it's just accepted, you know, and the crazy part is like all these big conglomerates own all these radio stations. They program them all from one central location, but every station has a chart influence, which is pardon my French, it's horseshit, because it's kind of like, if you've got one guy programming it, it's one station. It doesn't, if it's that big, if it's a serious channel, they've only got one report, so there's kind of a lot of weird stuff going on in radio these days. And it's, the big companies can afford to pay these guys, the gatekeepers, to get their music played, but it's kind of hard for a new act, and it's an interesting experiment to try and figure things out. Even Spotify, you can get all the spins you want, but a million spins only pays an artist $7,500 gross. So,
good Lord,
it's just not the big money maker. I laugh when people get the chart, they get the plaques, the million. Oh, I've got 1 million streams. Oh, good for you.
Congratulations.
That should barely pay for you making that recording, I would think. You know what I mean? But
pay for the plaque, right?
Not even pay for it. Yeah.
That's why so many people are doing stuff at home, and that kind of brought me to the doom slide thing. So
yeah.
There you go.
It's really awesome. What I've noticed about you in the time that I've known you in the years is that you are that guy that like helps any sort of musician friend of yours, Todd Kearns and Brent Fitz and, the Toot guys and, all those guys you've kind of helped over the years. And you are really open about how you help them. You're like, well, listen, I don't know shit about it, but let's try to, figure something out. And, I think that's really awesome.
I think, look, for me, one of the most important things that's always has been honesty, right? I mean, I started out as a merch guy. So I'm 21 years old and I'm carrying bags of cash around at the time, that was, so you have to build that trust right away. And then after a few years, kind of a weird story about Syracuse, New York. My music teacher growing up, the guy that I took bass lessons from, was this guy named Buzz Kua. He was an older guy. When I first started taking lessons, he was probably in his late 60s, early 70s. And I was a kid. I was 9 or 10, I think. Well, Buzz's kids, you might recognize their names. Rick Kua is one of the first born-again Christian rock stars of all time. And he was also the bass player in the band The Outlaws for a lot of years. And his other son, Nick, started out as a tour accountant, tour manager for Foghat back in, and he became this guy, went on to tour manage countless bands, Ozzy and Motley Crue and all these guys for years and years. And now, of course, he's with Cher and has been with Roger Davies for many years with all his different acts. And Nick was on the Ozfest in 2001 while I was slinging shirts for a couple of bands. And Slipknot and Papa Roach, and he sees me one day and he goes, "What are you doing out here?" And it was, and I didn't even realize it.
Sure,
he was, he was kind of the guy that was in charge, and it was, so we started to talk, and I started asking him questions whenever I had a chance, like, how does somebody get to do what you do, and he referred me to this other guy that had ties to upstate New York, Rusty Hooker. Greatest name in rock and roll, and
both of all those names are good, by the way.
Yeah, and it's, and I loved it, and I got to meet Rusty, and he lived here in Bradenton, Florida, and he started to teach me. Him and God, the names are starting to escape me, but there were people that I worked with through him that he had worked with, and. So I started to learn the game, and he put me out as an accountant. My first gig for them was I was a promoter rep tour accountant on the Winans Family Reunion Tour in 2002. Yeah. So I was 25. It was a tour that was losing. I mean, they were losing money like crazy, and it was promoted by Quentin Perry, and it was like old school, like gospel R&B promoting style. Like it was everything was cash. Nobody talked about anything. It was all kind of, it was just all this stuff. And I'm going, this can't be the way that this is done. Right. I mean, I'm paying people's wages in cash. Like this is nuts,
this can't be right.
But it was a learning experience, and there were 45 performers, and they were almost all of them were related to each other. They were all family. So it was a really interesting way to get started. And then I ended up going out with the Counting Crows not long after that, and I did some stuff with them, and it just kind of grew from there. So it was,
how did you get your skills as an accountant? Was it just because you'd been handling money with you know, with all the merch stuff, or like, how did that all come about? How did you learn how to, you know, when I started like tour managing and production managing, that was a skill that I like didn't have initially and had to learn. How did that come about for you?
And the tricks of the settlement, you know, who taught you the tricks of
that's-
settlement?
Yeah, the settlement part is the deal.
I think the
right?
settlement stuff is just learning as you experience it, you know, and I was really lucky because Rusty had been around, you know, I mean, he had been tour accountant of the year for Polestar. He had done, you know, he was an agent for Roger Davies. So I not only was I learning how to be a tour accountant, but I was listening to and watching the deals be made. Right. So I had a really good perspective from the agent side, as well as, you know, what I was supposed to be doing as the tour accountant. I was already good with the books and the cash because of the merch stuff. You know, that was, you know, obviously if I'm short money, it's coming out of my pocket. So it was something that I was never uncomfortable with, you know? So that kind of made it an easy transition, I think. And then it was just a matter of getting the experience. And to be honest, that Winans family tour was so unique and presented so many weird challenges for me because I was actually playing the promoter rep role as well. You know, here I was settling shows with buildings, writing checks, and then settling the shows with myself, basically, because I was also the tour accountant on the tour. And it, you know, and that
nothing like settling with yourself.
Yeah,
that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, and, you know, our friends, you know, Cam Marpole from Live Nation and Ron Chamberlain can all vouch for that kind of stuff because they played both of those roles.
Right.
Andy Grabowski. There's some great people that kind of have these dual roles now that they play all the time. And here I didn't know anything about it. I was 25 and it was my first time doing this, and it was definitely interesting, you know, and
those are times too where the deals were different. Like nowadays, people are getting, you know, pretty much straight ahead deals. But when I started anyway, it was like, you know, I was doing Reverend Horton Heat, and their whole deal was like take low money, but all back end. And so it was fighting over advertising and fighting over, you know, I mean, all kinds of stuff. And I would literally, I wasn't mixing them because the entire show was settlement, was like me in there going, nope, this isn't right. And that's bullshit. And
looking at the book of print ads and all that shit.
Oh, man.
Oh my God.
And just fighting over pennies, man.
It's
Fighting over pennies.
It's funny, man. I'm the guy when it comes to the advertising stuff. Like I've become one of those guys that's look. It's kind of a given now, right? You got your book of ads and you got to go through it. And I'm the stickler for like the cover sheet, right? Like for me, if it's off by 2 cents, I go back and have them just look, you know, it's fine, but just go reprint me one so that it's right, you know? And I did that to somebody once where it was literally like 11 cents or something like that, you know, and we had gone through the book and everything else was good. And later that guy ended up working for a booking agent that I was working with. And he recognized me when he came to a show and he goes, man, you're the guy that made me change that. And I was like,
you're the guy that made me change something for 5 cents. Yeah.
You know, it's always interesting. I mean, I think it's always still a challenge to confront the promoters when you've been doing this for, I'm into, 2+ decades of it now. Right. And it's still interesting when you have to challenge somebody on something that they've given you. You know, and
what are the major changes that you've seen since back in the day when there were smaller promoters and everyone's fighting for space in their own little territory and whatever, and now that's this huge AEG or Live Nation world, you as being the accountant or the settlement guy, like what are the differences in that? Like what do you notice has changed?
You know, it's an interesting question because I kind of came in at the very end of all the independent stuff, right? It was when I first started doing this, it was kind of when I became an accountant, the Live Nations and the AEGs were already kind of 3/4 of the way there. You know what I mean?
It kind of came in like an SFX kind of time.
Yeah, it was kind of that end of SFX.
They were starting to conglomerate.
Yeah. And it was already kind of there, you know, and look, I worked for ZZ Top for 5 years. I mean, our thing I wasn't having like knock down, drag them out settlements with ZZ. It was about cash management. It was about, we were doing a lot of flats, but then we would go to versus deals, and it was just watching the structures of things and watching management change. And I think for me, the big thing that I've seen has been the movement to do away with accountants for years, right? I mean, when I first started doing this, Every
Every
tour
band
that
had an accountant.
Every
yeah.
tour that had a band that, we were moving chairs around, you had an accountant. And then the promoters, as it became bigger Live Nations and bigger AEGs, it was like, oh, well, there's a tour rep, or there's somebody for this or there's somebody for that. So it became like they kind of convinced everybody that it was less of a priority for the bands to have somebody looking after their stuff. And and I guess the deals altered that, the amphitheater deals changed. They became much more like, hey, there's, here's the 10 fixed expenses that you're going to face. And it's all these, and then it became cross collateralized deals. And so the whole tour was one big thing that you were kind of like, oh, okay, so this is, and it was all kind of on the fly, as I went around, because it was starting to happen while I was doing it, and the best experience I think I had, or the funniest story I guess about it, is when I was with Kid Rock, which was after you guys had been there.
Yeah.
We did this $20 ticket tour with Live Nation, and of course it was all top secret. I mean, I was settling the shows, but they didn't tell me anything about what was supposed to go into the settlements, and it was a really difficult thing for us to figure out at first, because the local reps didn't know what was going in either. So at the first couple of shows, I just kind of created this thing of like, all right, look, everything's going back to the office. This is all above us, right? So the things we have to note are like the 8 or 9 different expenses that are going to affect each venue differently. Your labor cost, your catering, and somebody was charging for ice. You had to take, you would sit there and you'd be like, really, like, it's like, what's the
really?
Point? But it was, so I came up with this list of, the 8 or 9 expenses that I would accept every night from a promoter. Everything else went back to the main office, because there was nothing I could do to settle the shows. It was cross collateralized, and there were so many other income streams that were being incorporated in that we weren't seeing or didn't know about, that it was kind of, I had to make it up as I went. I don't know if I can take credit for this, but that's how all amphitheater settlements are now, right? So it's kind of like when you go back there, and I've done a few of them since then, it's kind of one of those things where you kind of go back and go, oh, well, it's, even though we're doing more of them as shows, or they're it's a tour thing now, and they've kind of ironed, there's more of it is disclosed. There's not as much, it's not this, background deal that was done, and it's all out there on paper. It really kind of made the deals simpler, and so the need for an accountant in an amphitheater became a little less than it had been, and now with everything changing the way that it has, and what's coming, we don't really know, but we do know that the onus is being, the promoters are trying to put the onus on the band for all kinds of expenses that are just really jacking up the band's costs, which makes it threatening for our wages, which makes it threatening for what they're going to be able to carry as production, because the budgets are going to be, directly affected by it, and if the deals don't go that way, if that was all just a threat, and but I'm curious to see,
definitely.
You also you also mentioned that the deals are kind of already done, but not only with the promoter, the busing and trucking deals all seem to kind of be done before ahead of time. The overdrives and all that other stuff used to pay out. That's all kind of seemed, at least in my eyes, I mean, I'm looking at it from afar, seems to have gone away too.
Carrying cash is frowned upon, and now getting dollars or getting money in Europe is getting more and more difficult. And I'm sure that it's going to be even more difficult now. I mean, the article that came out the other day about the whole Brexit situation and how the EU is refusing to grant free visas for English artists and crew.
Yeah.
That does affect the bottom line, and not only does it affect it cash wise, but it affects the time that bands have to pay people in advance to go and do all this stuff. So, immigration costs are going to have to go up, I would think, in some way, shape, or form. I mean, we're still waiting on all the details of it, but it's going to have a direct effect on artists. And if going to Spain, if you're only going to do 2 shows and the cost, we're almost going to have to budget per country, or do, a German leg of the tour and do 20 shows there, and then do, okay, what places can we afford to do this for? What makes sense? I'm curious to see how it's going to play out, but I do see the need now for accountants again. And that's going to be a pretty interesting thing to watch, because any place where the seats aren't screwed down to the floor, you know, you're going to need somebody that's at the venue all day long, checking on what's going on and watching that stuff. Whereas it's become, you know, I've done it a million times, tour manager, accountant. You show up with the band. You don't have time to go out and count every seat that's on the floor at a stadium. If you're the tour manager doing accounting, you shouldn't, you know. So that's why the bigger shows have accountants and sometimes teams of accountants, you know, that are out there, which I'd love to have one day, a team of
A team of accountants would be great.
I did those stadium shows on my own. So it was kind of one of those things where I'm like, it would be fun. Yeah. Thank God I had Cam and Ron and Ghost on Guns N' Roses when we were doing all that stuff, because it was so many moving parts. And so much changing on a regular basis there. You know, it was a very fluid situation. Yeah. All that stuff. So.
Hey, I want to back up just a little bit, and I don't know how much you can talk about this, but it made me always wonder, Kid Rock did that tour that you were speaking about that everyone in the industry was kind of looking at, because they're like, wait a minute, how is he able to do a tour with a $20 ticket when everybody else has to charge $100 to make it, you know, viable? And what the rumors were, and I don't know how much you can talk about it, but the rumors were that he was grabbing, you know, he owned the alcohol, he owned the parking lot, he owned the this and that, and that's how he was making money. And if that's true, you don't have to acknowledge it, but if it is true, how come other artists haven't followed down that path?
You know, to be honest, I to this day don't have all the details on it. They never told me how it really worked. I mean, the only way that I can describe it is there was a healthy partnership between Live Nation and Kid Rock, right? And because, you know, it was the Detroit-based office, they'd known each other from day one, and they were creative. You know, Rick Franks is one of the best in the business, and he was before he was with Live Nation, and he still is today.
Been around forever. Rick's been around.
Yeah, he's been around forever.
And he's one of my favorite people in the business to deal with. So whatever his creative mind, him and Dave Clark and all those guys, you know, I mean, you think about that Detroit team, you know, Gary Meyer and Ron Claus and all those guys. I mean, I love all of that team, and I loved them before we did the Kid Rock thing, but that really made me kind of like part of the family. And I couldn't be happier to have been welcomed into that group of guys and girls. I mean, the staff there, everybody's always been incredible. And whatever they came up with, it worked, you know, and I'm not sure.
But how come other artists haven't really followed that? Like, the ticket prices nowadays are ridiculous.
I think it scares people, man. I mean, I think it comes down to, you know, Bob was willing to take the risk. And Bob, I mean, Kid Rock, you know, it was just kind of, you know, he got a production guarantee, so every night at least he was covering his expenses. Right? But that was it, and it was everything else was on us to try and make it go. But when you're selling tickets for $20, people are going to buy that. You know,
People
I mean, we sold Irvine.
Dude, sold to the gills, right? Like
he'd never sold out in Irvine. You know, and he even said that.
It's not off I-75.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just. But it was an amazing thing, you know, and I'm so glad that I got to be part of that, you know, and it's still to this day one of those camps that if I got the call tomorrow, I would go back to help them out. You know what I mean? And I'm so happy they've got John Moffat, because John's like this great young kid he's like the artist whisperer, you know what I mean? And I know you know him, Tater, you've known him since he was a teenager, but he's just got this. He
knocked on my door one day and how do you get in the business?
Yeah,
I took him to a Bob Seger rehearsal, and that's his history.
Yeah, like he literally knocked on your door, right? Like came to your house.
He went to school with my kids, and they weren't friends really, but he knew what I did for a living somehow through them or the talk in school. I don't know.
Bring
one
your
day,
dad to work day.
Knock at my door, and hey, dude, I want to do what you do. Okay, well, he wanted to do sound at that time, but yeah, literally, and then. I took him around with me for a few weeks. We did some Seeger rehearsal at Kid Rock's place and a couple other things. I introduced him to some people, and you know, the guy's a master networker even back then when he was 18. So
and you know, Bill Blackwell. I mean, you know, there's
Bill's great guy.
We got to talk about that. I mean, and I just saw somebody's comment about bigger audiences, more merch. Yeah, huge. And that is one of the most important things to me in this business. And I learned this really when I was the accountant for AC/DC, and I'm that is the job, I think, after all these years that I'm the most grateful for, because of the team of people that I got to work with from the top down there. But what it taught me was, you know, I had always said that, you know, you keep ticket prices down, you sell more tickets, you're getting played in front of more people. You sell more t-shirts if you can keep t-shirt prices down.
Sell more of those blinking horns, dude. The blinking horns. How many?
It's about volume, man. Yeah, dude, it's about volume. You know,
fill everybody in with the ticket payment structure is for AC/DC.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the AC/DC is it's a very simple structure. You know, it's 2 to 3 ticket tiers, no matter what the venue size is. The ticket prices are capped at a certain number because for them, they're looking out for their fans. And they're right. And it works every time. And there's a reason why a promoter, the deals are made for AC/DC shows because the promoters don't have to work for it. You know, when you do this right, you put a show on sale and the ticket prices are this. And people look at it and go,
themselves.
I'm buying 4 of those. And that's the day. You know, here you go. We need to promote the on sale date, and then the advertising book should stop, right? And that's where, and that's really, it's a brilliant plan, and it's something that I wish more people did. You know, and I think that Bob's tour, you know, there was an element of that in there too. You know, when you can buy 4 tickets and beers for $100, right? Which was what the deal was. Yeah. You know what I mean? You go in, you got your tickets, you get this many beers, you know, free, or you get a t-shirt or whatever it was, you know, how there were different tiers of it, but that's a reasonable night. You know what I mean? You get 4 tickets, you get 4 beers, you know, and you're kind of like, wow, you know, okay. And so now I can go buy t-shirts or I can go do this. And, you know, the fun part, we would go out and upgrade people from the lawn to the front seats because we wanted to make sure that the scalpers weren't getting the front row. Yeah. And I always had a great time walking around up there. I mean, we used to joke so much in different towns, you know, we could identify the people that were like super like, dude, you know, who are you? You know, you shouldn't be giving me these tickets. You know, it was all, they were afraid, you know, and I'm going, I used to say to people in the Kid Rock crowd, I'm like, do I look like I belong in this audience? You know, like I don't have any neck tattoos. I mean, like, where am I supposed to be? You know,
you weren't wearing your short cutoffs.
Yeah.
Jean cut off.
People laughing, you know, and it was, there was a couple that I stood with. I'll never forget this. She claimed that she was a cop. And I'm like, all right, well, great. I said, look, I just gave these people tickets. Watch. And they walk down to the front and they get their seats right in the front row. And she goes, oh, well, I didn't realize. They said, well, it's too late now. I've already given your tickets away. I'm just walking away. But it's like, you know, I mean, I get it, you know, because I kept asking them for their tickets in exchange. And they're like, oh, these must be counterfeits. And I'm like, whatever. I'll walk you down there if I have to, you know, but I'm just trying to help people get, you know, upgraded.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of fun with that over the years, you know, and just different things. I mean, look, my favorite part about this business are the people, though. You know, I mean, look, we've known each other for over a decade now, you know, and, you know, Tater referred to the Russian experiment that we had when we were there with Slash, you know, that old communist era train that we rode on.
In the never forget that.
The 150 heat wave going through where people were dying in St. Petersburg and we were playing in those tin buildings. And I just remember like we all lost weight doing those shows just by being in the venue, you know? And I mean, it was just, you know, the things that we've seen. I mean, that, you know, the year after we were in Singapore when the tsunami hit Japan on our way to Osaka, you know, I mean, we were just dodging natural disasters and any other thing that was going on those tours. And, you know, you think about it, man. I mean, the time that you guys were there, the first year we were on the road for over 10 months, you know, straight. And we were on a different continent every month. And it was just,
I hope I can still do that coming up. I don't know if I've got this in me anymore. Hey, Pete, I want to back up for a second. You mentioned guys like Ron Chamberlain and guys, they've been in the business literally forever. You know, they're single promoter, local promoter, traveling to shows to what it is now with, you know, 2 promoters. What was the 1 or 2 guys or any kind of story like, here's a young Pete MERLUZZI, up and coming guy and all enthusiastic about his job and comes up to just some guy he's got to settle with and he's just like, holy shit, I got to settle with this guy tonight. Who is that guy?
Who's that guy?
It's funny. I don't have anyone that I've ever had a real acrimonious settlement with. Like I've had some funny settlements. I've had some stuff where I won't get into names, but I did a kid show for Jake Berry back in 2002. I was tour managing Bob the Builder, right? I mean, greatest tour ever because there were no stars. We had like an all-star crew, all-star truck drivers, you know what I mean? Like it was just this great run. And we were in 2 cities a week, you know, and it was just this great thing. And you're bringing, you know, kids are smiling and laughing. And was actually the first time I ever had to go out on stage and talk to an audience with a microphone on. So I would go out and do the show intros. And of course, I turned it into a rock show, which they had done before. It was like these little it was a kiddie intro thing. And I got out there and started getting the audience chanting for Bob because I told him he was right behind the curtain and he could, just this ridiculous stuff. And, but that's like, for me, it's always been about, keeping the morale good. You should be laughing. We should be having fun doing this. But I've had a couple of promoters where on that tour, there was a guy in New Jersey, and I despise this guy to this day. He was a lying scumbag. And
there are some out there, aren't there?
And it was in a shitty arena, and it was just the whole deal was bad, and the crew was terrible. They cut rigging ropes. They were throwing gear into the stands. I mean, it was awful, right? This whole thing. And I was trying to be really diplomatic about it. Again, I was still pretty young. And the guy had some history with some of the people on our tour because he had worked for another live children's entertainment company that happens to be located right down the street from my house, right? So, so he had worked with them at one point, and there were some stories about him from those people, which I found kind of interesting. But I was giving him the chance, and I got into it with him, and it was the first time I'd ever had to get belligerent with someone about a settlement. And it wasn't because there was something in a bill that was bad. It was because of the way the building conducted its business. He conducted his business. The crew conducted their business. It was less than professional. And it was a kid show. And it was inappropriate. And for me to just kind of fly off the handle on this guy was the first time that I'd ever had to do that. And about 2 years later, I was out on ZZ Top, and he appeared at another show.
Oh, no.
And now I was polite and nice about the whole thing. And he actually brought up something in a snide remark saying that I was still upset about something that happened 2 years ago. And at that point, I just flipped the switch, and I made his day miserable. And that was, and I took joy in that, there's another guy, there was a guy in Portugal that I had some problems with, that every time I see him now, where, if he showed up in Brazil at some shows, I just know the guy's a crook. And I won't deal with him. If I see his name on something, I tell his boss, I'm not dealing with this person. Get me somebody else. I don't want him around the show. I don't want him on the grounds. I don't want him anywhere. And there's only been a couple of people like that over all the years. But, I had one settlement I did where the promoter was hammered. And part of the deal on this tour was that the catering was to be paid for. So it was like this back end item. So we were carrying our own caterer. So it went on at the bottom. And I got it included in the bill in the settlement, and I had it added on at the bottom. So we got reimbursed for it twice. And It was like a $16,000 bill. And there was another accountant on that tour with me who I adore to this day. And she looked at me and she goes, you just had him pay for that twice. And I said, shouldn't show up to settlement drunk. I mean, that's just how it goes. And I don't think he ever figured it out. I mean, we've never, I've seen him, and, we've never had a discussion about it, but, you don't do that, and it's like, if I've got to be here all day suffering through your nonsense, and I've got to be together, you're going to be together too. Otherwise you're going to end up paying the price for it. Cause if I find any reason that the bands need me to do something for you, I mean, that's who I work for, so that's what you got to do. You look out for people, and I feel that same way about our crew, every time that, you guys know how it was. I mean, if we ever ran into a problem with anybody on the road, we tried to fix the problem before we did anything, because they were part of the family, right. And I've been, I've learned so much working with guys like Ron Chamberlain and like Cam and just seeing these different approaches. And, even, Ina, who I was talking about before, we work together, we're very different, dynamics, but I have so much respect for her for what she does and how she does it, because she's, she knows her stuff, and that's why she's advising for CAA or doing stuff like that these days, and I love seeing that, because those are people that you can count on, you can trust them, and you can learn from people. And if you stop learning, it becomes uninteresting, and that's we never know everything,
Not in this business.
Not in this business.
But there's so many great resources. I mean, from the managers on down, the agents, and Chris Dalston, who he's just one of the best guys I've ever dealt with in the business at CAA, you know, and he's just the AC/DC thing from, again, he was part of that machine. And I think I said this to you guys the other day when we were kind of like catching up and just kind of talking about stuff. It was the most respected I felt as an accountant or as a crew member, somebody whose opinion was valued, somebody whose input was valued, you know, and that was from the band, from the management, from the agents, from Opie and his whole crew. You know, that gang, that family, I'm so lucky I got to do that, you know, and it kind of fell into my lap. And it was one of those things where I had done some stuff with Slash where we had opened for Ozzy, and a lot of his guys were AC/DC's guys. And, and it was,
goes a long way.
Yeah. So when there was when there was an opening, that was how I got the call, you know, and that I'm super grateful for that. You know,
let me, I want to backtrack on a couple of things here.
Yeah.
Pete, I mean, I hate to say this now, but we can go on for an hour. I mean, this conversation's fantastic.
I told you, we're going to have to do like a 5-part miniseries.
Yeah. You brought up a point with me that I didn't think we were going to get in today, and how you feel, how you just said with AC/DC from, I guess, basically from the management and the band all the way down to the truck drivers. You guys were a team. Yeah. And the agents and everybody. And I've been on a tour with Pooch together, and when we got disrespected pretty bad by an agent over doing something, we pulled off what we would say a miracle. We had played a TV show in New York City and then did an overnighter into a major arena into Canada. And the agent, and we were open for doors on time, and the agent had made a snide email that we all saw. And I got to tell you, I've always remembered that. Mm-hmm. And it's I got to say, looking back on it, I've always, since then, I've always had a feeling that they're not on our side. And I'm hoping maybe when this is over that we can get past, at least maybe I can get past it. I don't know. You know, like.
There are managers and agents that are not on our side, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had experiences with a couple of agents where the things that were said in front of the crew were shocking to me.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff, you know, I mean, people don't forget it. You know,
I'll never forget it.
Because it doesn't affect them. You know, they feel like
this was way into my career. You know, this was 25 years into my career when this happened. And
it's pretty shocking. I mean, there are people that just, there's always going to be that though, you know, and I guess, I mean, look,
I guess I'm hypersensitive right now because I've seen a lot of agents, and it's not the one I'm talking about, but I've seen them during this pandemic saying, oh, you know, we feel for the crews, this and that. They say all this stuff, but when you see the, you know, actions speak louder than words, right? When you see no action, you know, it's like,
yeah. And their game's changed too, man. I mean, you know, this past year would have been the year where all of those new driving restrictions were in place in the United States. And we were going to be faced with all this, you know, hey, the routing really makes a difference. You know, the routing makes or breaks a tour budget now, right? A lot more than it did before even, where, you know, I mean, can you imagine us trying to do that tour that we did in 2010 in Europe with Slash here? You know what I mean? Like it would be, there's no way. I mean, the way that we did that, there were days where we didn't sleep for a week, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or you know, weeks where we didn't sleep for days, I guess is the way. But it's, but you know, it was one of those things where here we were on. I'll never forget that charter plane that we were on with all the crew and the gear, where we went through that turbulence thing, Pooch, and you were just like, you went full almost famous. I almost wet myself. I was laughing so hard, and it was just, you know, those are those moments that. You know, like
we're all gonna die.
Other people on the plane with us, which was really weird because we had kind of, you know what I mean? It was, they were like, "Who the hell are these guys?" But it was just moments like that's why we're so tight to this day when we haven't been able to see each other stand in the same room together for years. But you know, we went through some stuff, man. You know, sure. that tour. You know, you were talking about Todd Kearns earlier. You know, and that whole thing where his retina was detached during that time. I was at every emergency room in Europe with him, you know, just waiting to see a doctor to make sure that he was still okay. I mean, Todd and I spent a lot of time together sitting in foreign emergency rooms waiting for somebody to take him in, you know. But it was
and by the way, what's going on with Canadian retinas? Like, I don't understand.
Maybe
You know, another a guy that I know from, well, you know, Super Chris. I don't, if you know, Super Chris had the same thing happen, and I could never figure it out, man. I mean, I don't know. It, you know, first it was always like that. We go, oh, it's the head banging for all these years or whatever.
It must be.
I think it's the caffeine, man. I think it's caffeine.
Tim Hortons.
Coffee, Coca-Cola. You know what I mean? Like those guys, all three of them. That's the only thing I could ever connect the dots with. You know.
For those of you that don't know, two band members in the Slash with Miles Kennedy band have had detached retinas. And I know that Brent, both of his eyes have happened. I'm not sure about Todd.
It's the Tim Hortons. Ron Chamberlain says it's all the Tim Hortons. He's right. That's exactly right. Yep.
So we're trying to figure out what the Canadian connection is to detached retinas.
I don't know. I mean, that, you know, think about that incident. You know, think about what we did that night when here we are in Moscow. And I know you've had Brent on, and I know you've had
JD on, and he talked about it too. Yeah.
I mean, it's legendary. Just, but you know, and that was. The funny thing was, again, you know, we were fighting about that. You know, I got some calls that night that were not very pleasant calls from people that will remain nameless, but it was just, I was going to send him home. He had to get his surgery done. Otherwise he could have gone blind, you know?
Yeah,
and it was me that called Fitz at, 3 a.m. or whatever it was and said, listen, you're playing bass tomorrow. And I woke JD up in his room and I said, start listening.
You're playing drums.
Start listening to the set, because you're going to play drums tomorrow, right? And you got these 2 shows. And he's like, what are you talking about next? And they all knew that it was, we all knew that it was a possibility, but it was, so I prefaced it with both of them 2 weeks before. But, it's one of those things that you just think, oh, that's never going to happen, and, but, here it was. We had to do 2 shows in Russia with, John Douglas dusting off the drumsticks, and he did great, and you watch the video of that stuff that, is floating around out there. And it's just, it's an
never know. You never would have known. And then we were lucky enough to work with Tony after that for a good Asian run to fill in for Todd.
There's a guy came in with no band rehearsal, showed up
and played. I know.
Full set and then play the set that night. I mean, it was ridiculous. And to fill in for a guy like Todd is impossible.
That's tough.
I mean, we talked about him the other day, and we were saying, he was that we always called him the secret weapon, and it was, because he's just a talented guy. But that whole band was, worlds above what Slash had done in his solo projects before that, and that's what made it different. And I was lucky enough to actually be the one that first recommended Fitz for the audition. And then we had other people calling in, and I think awesome. Kevin Churko got involved. I think there were a couple of people, but that was really how we approached we had to introduce Slash to this guy that he didn't know. But then it was up to him. The auditions were held, and it was really up to him to make the impact, and he did. And he brought Todd in, and eventually brought Frank in, and that band is what it is because of him. And so I'll take a little bit of credit.
You should, and you should.
One of my favorite things in this business that I've gotten to do is connecting people. Like putting a team together, or getting to get Slash on the Leslie West record, and Leslie became a friend, and he's passed just recently, and I would never have expected to be able to do something like that. I mean, it was all I did was make the connection, but it was and I will take the blame for the Billy Gibbons Nickelback connection. I was the one that kind of facilitated that. So
it's you.
It was, and I mean, no apologies, but it was it was kind of it was just a fluke, but that was, something else that I got to do. And it's, like getting Bones to play on Shadow and the Thrill record, and just things like that, just little stuff. I mean, that's my favorite part of it. That's kind of the A&R guy thing, and that's kind of where the Noise Factory came from. Which Tater, you've talked about,
I love the Noise Factory.
I mean, tell us what that is, because I don't think our listeners know what that is. So tell us what
I do a totally pirate radio show, and it's when I first started to do it, it was, I literally talked to BMI and ASCAP, and I said, I want to do this right, but obviously I'm starting from scratch. How do I do this? And the guy just said to me, he goes, look, just do it until somebody tells you to stop, because by that point you will have garnered enough of an audience where you should be able to turn around and start to sell advertising or do whatever. And that hasn't happened to this day, but I took a bunch of years off from doing it too. And then
He took a nice little break there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Mike Parrish, who's this radio guy that I've been working with on Shadow and the Thrill, came to me and he was working on a new magazine called Max Alt Rock. And he's had Max Alt for years, and it's been a radio trade magazine and digital. And he was going to do a new rock one. And he said to me, he goes, you know, we had talked about kind of starting an online radio station that was, and I would bring in other people to kind of do shows to fill up a 24-hour schedule. So we're kind of working on a plan for that this past year because, you know, what else do we have to do? And he goes, you know, why don't you do the Noise Factory as part of a playlist thing for the new magazine again? And I said, yeah. I said, that'd be awesome, you know? So it's given me another opportunity to dig into new music again and start to find bands that I'm excited about, you know, and it's harder to find them for me right now. It's not the same as it was 8 years ago when I started doing it on the Kid Rock thing, or when I was doing the iHeart radio station for Slash. But it was definitely one of those deals where I've gotten to dig into some records again and, you know, and start to really listen to music that's out there. And I get, you know, when people say that rock is dead, I get it to a point, because it's not that bands aren't making the music. It's that it's a really hard avenue for people to go to get listened to. You know, it's hard for you to find a station that's not, you know, costs a rock band 40 G's plus to get their songs on the radio.
Wow.
And that's just to get by the song promoters at times. There's some shit going on in this business still that people don't want to talk about. And it's just like but it's true. It's, you know, and for me, it's about sharing good music with people. Like if we have the same common interests, chances are you're going to listen to a Noise Factory and you're going to hear at least 5 or 6 songs where you go, wow, these guys are pretty good, you know? And the stuff's all up online, and it's, you know, you can go to my website and kind of hear all that stuff. And
yeah. So how do they find Noise Factory? Where do they go?
Right now it's under blackbirdentertainmentinc.com. Everything. I've done this new website where I kind of can, you know, just put everything together. I had a friend from the corporate world that said to me, you know, you really need to do something where you get all your stuff in one place, because it's just, and you know, I never really thought about it. I mean, until we doing this show, I hadn't even had a picture of myself on Facebook. We put that ad up the other day, and I had all these people that were friends of mine on Facebook going, I didn't even know this was you. And I was like, well, all right. Well, so
it's been a while.
The veil had to come down, because I had done that on purpose. I mean, you know how it is. It's when you tour and people figure out who you are, what you do, they find you now online. And it's really, for years, I just didn't want to have any part of that. You know, the Slash thing taught me that, you know, because there's so many people hanging around that they're looking to get close somehow, you know, and I really
agendas.
Yes. Yeah. Agendas, or just, you know, hangers on or whatever. And I just didn't really care for that stuff. I didn't, you know, it's never been about that for me. It was always, you know, it was about this. It was about the family that we build. And you know, there's so many guys and girls that we've worked with over the years that, you know, there's that connection that you're never going to have that with other people in your life, you know? And now, you know, I'm starting to look at, well, what else can I do? You know? And so I got into the voiceover thing, which is something I've always wanted to do. And, you know, it's a struggle. I mean, I'm just trying to audition as much as I can. And hopefully, you know, I land a few things that start to kind of build up a reputation. I've got this Doom Slide thing that I did for fun with a buddy of mine. And, you know, newsflash, it is actually me on the record. It's not, I've been kind of avoiding talking about it, because for me, it was always a tongue in cheek thing, and we did it for fun. And I kind of came up with this way to make it anonymous. So we kind of created this funny image, and it's this, you know, it's an experiment, you know, but when people are picking it up and you're on a chart somewhere in South America and you're laughing about it, it's not selling any records, because, you know, it's South America, they're making their own, but it's just, right. It's cool that people are finding it and hearing it, you know, and that's all it was really about. It was about sharing something fun for people, you know? So again, that's on the Blackbird site, you know, blackbirdentertainmentinc.com. And I did vinyl because I wanted to do vinyl. I love records. I love vinyl records. I love the experience of listening to music that way. You know, we've gotten away from it for so many years with shuffle and whatever we do with iPods and streaming. And when you have a record, you have to listen to it the way that the artist intended it. You know, there's a story to a record, or there's a vibe to a record, and it's really the only way to soak it up, you know? And for me, because I still listen to music, I still love doing that, you know? And, you know, it's just, there's something special about that, you know.
And then what's the website that can find everything and contact you for voiceovers and all that stuff?
blackbirdentertainmentinc.com.
I just always remember when we first started working together, and I'd get your email and it'd be Blackbird in there, and
I know.
I always thought it was Bill Blackwell. He's got like the same name. Yeah. So
and it came up. It was something completely unrelated to that, and I didn't realize at the time that, you know, dude, there's a million of them out there. Which is
I'm
funny.
sure
You're never going to come up with a unique name anymore. Although,
no, I know.
Wrong End of the Snake is a good one. So that one.
I love your coffee mug, by the way.
Thanks. This is my ode to Greg Ferguson. So
we normally don't get into technical stuff on jobs here. It's more about relationships and how people have evolved in their jobs, and you going from merchandising to tour managing, accounting, managing your own career now, all that stuff. But let me ask you this, especially touring Europe and as an accountant, and with the COVID situation, what if you're doing 30 dates in Europe? 5 of those are in Germany. I'm just hypothetical, and Germany shuts down, and those 5 shows are at the end, and those are your profit shows. How are people going to work around that? What's going to happen? I'm sure. I don't know if you have an answer, but what do you think?
I really don't know how it's going to work. I mean, we're wandering into uncharted territory again. I'm sure some of the guys that have got some more years than I do, I think Rusty and like your Steve Woods, you know, guys that were there when the game was still, you know, it was different every day, and the promoters were competing, and they were like, hey, we're going to fly you here, and, you know, you're going to do that. You know, I'm interested to see how it goes. I kind of feel like we're going to go backwards in a way. Not setting us back, but I do feel like the deals may be a little bit more of an older structure. You know, I mean, the tough part is, it's like, you don't get deadwood anymore. It's not like I can sit and count unprinted tickets or unsold tickets. They're all going to be digital. We're not going to have that kind of stuff. So again, it's going to come down to being on site, auditing what's going on, you know, and really making sure the seats are what they say they are. You know, it's going to be, I don't know what we're going to do, but I do know that every place where they've got seats that you can move around, there's going to need to be somebody there. You know, so arenas and stadiums are going to be highly, you know, you're going to need accountants there, you know.
Don't you think the margins are going to be so much closer, right? Because let's say you can only sell 50%, or, you know, let's hope 75%.
Here's my hope.
You know, you've seen these margins already when people are selling out is already tough with expenses. Yeah. So I'm just curious how, like, where, as an accountant, where do you think, where are they going to cut corners? Is it going to be less crew? Like, what's your opinion of what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think we're all kind of on the chopping block, to be honest. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but I mean, look, the real thing, that this is my hope, right? That, look, we're all fans of, like, you know, real handmade music, right? I think we could say that as a group of people. There's a difference between bands that still go out and play live and bands or acts that rely on all the other shit all the time, right? So pop acts are going to be faced with a real challenge. Although they sell more tickets recently, is it going to be enough for them to draw the audience anymore?
Because they got to put on the big production.
Well, their audience is also younger, and their audience has also been trained more to do everything on the computer. It's our age groups that are the people that love to go out and love to have that interaction, you know, that 30 and up kind of thing. So is going to a concert going to be as important to that younger age group? And how many of our bands are going to survive this? A lot of these guys, if they can't tour comfortably, why are they going to do it anymore? You know, there's going to be a lot of those things that we lose. There's going to be a lot of crew guys that we lose because of that same idea. If we can't be comfortable doing it, and we're not going to make as much, or we're going to be asked to do 4 jobs and we're going to make less money, there's going to be decisions that we all have to make. Now, for me, like, the thing that I look at, I think a lot of bands, like, let's take Priest, for instance, right? Priest could go out on stage in denim and leather and kick people's ass, right? Yeah. Still can do it to this day. I mean, I watched it for a year and a half, 2 years. They can do it without anything else. Give them a PA, make sure you can see them, and
a couple of rugs and a backline, and those guys are good.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And they can go out and kick people's butts. They can do it in smaller venues. They can do it in theaters where, you know, it's manageable, and people still get a great show. There's other acts that can't do that. You know, how do you remember we're doing those festivals where we lost power at one of those radio shows, and there are a bunch of bands on before Slash who could not play because the assists couldn't be used.
That's
and
right.
You're like, well, really? Like, if we can reroute the power to the PA and give your backline power, there's daylight. Why can't you play a fucking show? And I'm sorry, but I don't mean to fly off the handle about it, but that was the real thing. And so with Slash going up on stage, being able to do a full set, we didn't have any lights. We just turned the PA and the backline on and went and got it before the sun went down. And that was one of those events where that's a real rock band. You know what I mean? And it's not perfect. You know, I mean, it shouldn't be perfect. If it's live, if it's live, it should be live, you know? And I'm not bagging on anybody that uses assist, because a lot of guys need, hey, there's layers of backing vocals. There's a synth track. There's something. I totally get it. But when
people are expecting to hear it like the record,
right?
So when you can't do a show, because you can't play, you know, it's who's gonna step up and who's gonna fall down. You know, it's gonna be an interesting thing to see if that actually has an effect on how we move forward. I think there'll be less production. I think there'll be,
for sure. I think that the 27 trucks full of pyro and video wall is
it's gonna be hard. You know, I'm excited that Kiss got to do the New Year's show. You know what I mean?
Huge, huh?
I'm excited for all the guys on that crew. I mean, they got to go and do it. I love so many of those guys. It's an organization. It's a machine that we'll never see the likes of again. Yeah. You know, and that, you know, hey, let's be real about this. That very well could have been the last show they ever do. Yeah. Okay. You know, it may be the last show we see for a long time. What do you say about it? You know, what do we do? I mean, the thing that I take comfort in is this, is like, I'm looking at what else can I do? Right. And, you know, we talked about the voiceover stuff, and, you know, it's not making me money right now. I haven't figured out, you know, what my income should be at this point. You know, I've been fortunate. I made a lot of decent decisions in my life. I'm not, you know, living hand to mouth. It's something that you look at now and I think, wow, what could I be good at? You know, and I had to hire somebody to help me figure that out, you know, because I haven't had to have somebody write a letter of reference or look at a resume in 24 years. So
I think that's a big problem in our industry right now. I think that there's guys and women and men right now have never done anything else, and they're trying to figure out what other skills they have to offer to the world that could pull them through this next however many months it's going to take.
I mean, I will say this. One of the things that's occurred to me is because of the relationship building thing that I like to do and connect people. I mean, if I have my way with it, if I can find my way into it, if I could ever become a headhunter, I've got one of the best workforces in my Rolodex that I could ever have.
There's honestly 200 people out there right now that all need jobs, and that I know personally, skills of organization,
that I know personally. And if I can help people that I spent the last 24 years of my life working with somehow find a new path, or, you know, God willing, we get to work together on something, because there's so many creative, brilliant people in, you know, behind the scenes that people don't even realize. You know, and
can I put my name in for AC/DC then?
Yeah. John Lewis may get upset with you for that, but you can.
I don't do John Lewis's job. I'll do any job on AC/DC.
Anything.
I'll mop the stage.
Yeah.
I know, man. It's like, to be honest, it's one of those things where I look at it and I'm just so grateful for all the people that I've gotten to know over the years. And you know, we all come from different walks of life. We've all been able to travel the world together. And that aspect of my career is one of the things I'm most thankful for. You know, it's the people, the experiences, the fact that we've gotten through this. I haven't killed anybody. You know, I've thought about it, but I haven't done any of that. You know, there's just things that we've been really lucky to experience. And for sure, nobody, you know, that's why we're such like the odd man out at a regular dinner party with people. You know, when you come home, like, I don't have people around here that I've toured with. There aren't many of them, you know? So when I would be around other people and they'd be like, they always want to, I kind of keep quiet. I don't really want to talk about what I do, because if you know me, you know about it, but I don't, you know, like, this is my upstairs, right? In my house. When you go through the bottom of my house, you wouldn't have a clue
that you worked in the music industry
business, right? It's, you know, and then you walk upstairs and you're like, I've had people come up here and they're like, what is going on? I'm like,
what's happening?
You know, but I was a music fan beforehand. So I've got stuff I've collected. I've got stuff that, you know, it started out as just 8x10s from the tours that I was on. And then they stop making them. And I'm like, oh, now everything's bigger and it costs me a lot of money to get them framed. And, you know, because, you know, I don't want to hang a poster on the wall anymore. You know, I want it to look halfway decent. But I don't know. I'm hopeful that I can find my way into something like that, because if I can help, you know, a quarter of the people I know somewhere along the way, that's my way of helping. You know, I can't.
You are, Pete. You did this today, so
I can't change the world, but like we talked about the other day, it's like, hey, we got a bubble, right? And all the people in our bubble, if we can do something to help them out, they help their bubble out. And, you know, that's the only way you can do it. I don't have any grand illusions about anything. I just know that we've got a great group of people that are our friends and family in this, you know, and there's a lot that we can learn from each other. I'm excited to see where everybody goes. I'm excited to see what happens, but at the same time, we've all got mortgages to pay too. So, you know, what are we going to do? What are we going to do till then? And do we come back? You know, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. You know, there's a lot of questions for everybody in this business right now. And we're kind of the ones that everybody forgot about.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, and I'm just wondering, and this could be my age speaking, you say about coming back. I'm just wondering if I'm willing to, you know, now that I've been home the longest time I've ever been home since I think 1986. Am I going to be willing to put up with the same shit I used to put up with and all this stuff? My tolerance and all that. I've got a lot of questions now. I got to tell you.
You know what?
When you're working so much and you're just going from one tour to another, you know, that stuff, you don't have time to let a lot of that shit sink in. You get it done and you forget about it. When you've been at home for 8 months, you're thinking about that shit going, why would I do that?
Think about the price we've all paid, man. I mean, not all of us. I mean, I became a statistic, you know what I mean? My marriage fell apart, you know, after being gone for a decade, you know, and, you know, we all have to take responsibility for our roles and all those things in our personal lives, of course. But it's like, you know, there is a price to it. You know, I mean, none of us have a normal life, you know, I mean, it is going to be interesting to see. And there are going to be questions. And the only thing that's happened this whole year that was really disturbing to me was watching on a couple of people's forums the idea of blacklisting other people in this business. And I don't know how many people saw this, but I screenshotted that shit, because there's a lot of people talking out of turn because they think differently than somebody, or they this or they that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I don't want to be a part of any of that. You know,
I do agree. I do totally agree with you, but let me give you my little radical take on that. My radical take on that is I 100% agree with you, except we've all have little blacklists of our own anyway.
Oh, well, yeah, but that comes down to a different factor. I'm not talking, look, we all have differences in our personal lives. You know what I mean? But that has no effect on, it really comes down to this. And I've said this from the beginning, you know, and we touched on this the other day. It's important, you know, when it's your time to step away from something. You know, it's a tour. You never want to be asked to leave. You know what I mean? But if it's time, or you don't feel like you belong there anymore, it's good that we're all able to step back and go, you know what? My time here, I think, is gone. You know what I mean?
Ran its course.
But my rule was always, you know, and you guys will laugh because you'll probably remember this. There's the tour jackass rule. You know, there's always a tour jackass. And when you get rid of them, someone unexpected will always step up to take their
rise up to the top.
Yeah. And you know, and that was always kind of my joke about it, but it goes to the rule of if you're an asshole, expect to be treated like an asshole. You don't have to be the best at your job, but if you're the right fit for the right tour, then you're going to be there forever, because you fit the puzzle, you know? And it's important when you get a job where it's, hey, I'm the tour manager on this, or I'm just the accountant on this. You just stay in your lane for that, you know, like, and that's something that I've always enjoyed. I like being part of a team, right? So, you know, when I get to be the accountant and I can help the tour manager in some way because I understand at least what they're dealing with or what they've done, you know, I can help the crew, you know, I can help the production manager because I've hired and fired and dealt with the workers' comp claims, and I've done the payroll, and you know what I mean? Like, I'm there to help. That's what you do. And that's your part of the family. You know, that's how you function. And I can't get into, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't want to hire somebody because I don't like what you know, they're this or that. You know, to me, it's never been about anything other than, do you do your job well? And are you a good person to have around? You know what I mean? That should be the only thing. the only thing that we think about, you know, and I don't want to see that, you know. That's a terrible way for people to go about this job, you know what I mean?
Of course.
We all work for international acts that have people that have been raised and different views on everything. You know, if we couldn't get along on that bus, which we've got along that way for forever on those buses, why are we putting those divisions there now? You know, it's weird.
I think we should get into this a little bit more. We've kind of run out of time here, about 10 minutes over. Thank
Told
you
this
so
was
much.
going to happen.
I know, but we're going to go to our Q&A thing. We're going to spend another 40 minutes with Pete, and then we're going to absolutely have Pete back. He has lots more stories to tell. So thank you so much, Pete, for coming. We do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It was a blast. And,
Yeah,
you know, guys,
man.
go and check out the website. Check out Shadow and the Thrill. If you like Gary Moore, if you like that kind of style, blues-driven guitar stuff from that era,
Noise
go
Factory.
check them out. Check out the Noise Factory. Send me ideas and suggestions. Let's, you know, I mean, everybody out there, we've all crossed paths somewhere along the way, and you know, we're all going through the same thing right now. So, you know, if you want a good laugh, go listen to some Doomslide.
That's great, man. I love it.
I got a quick suggestion before we go. Noise Factory would be great. You know, we've lost, obviously, you know, Leslie West and Eddie Van Halen. What about one dedicated to those guys with your take on some deep cuts and stuff like that? With just those two great guitar players lost in 2020.
I was actually going to do one an entire hour for Leslie because we were close, and it's kind of my relationship with him. And I did one a few weeks ago about you know, all the guys that we lost last year, and Eddie was included in that mix. And you know, we've already started off this year on the wrong foot with Alexi from Children. You know, just things that, you know, whether we ever cross paths or not, you know, it's still one of those deals where we know there's a group of people that we do know that worked for them or worked with them, that interacted with those guys. So that, you know, people are impacted by that too, you know? So yeah, absolutely, man. And the Leslie one is on its way, actually.
Awesome.
So,
nice.
Look forward to that.
It's like the old Karnak thing there, Tater. You were reading my mind.
All right, guys. Thank you, Pete. Thanks very much. Next week on Wrong End of the Snake, it's Cheryl Hall. For the last 20 years, Cheryl has been a tour manager and accountant for Blondie, Slash featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, Billy Talent, Todd Rundgren, Meatloaf, Steven Tyler, Donna Summer, and many others. She started her career working for a publicist in the late 80s and early 90s, where she transitioned into artist management and PR. Around the year 2000, she was offered a touring position with Luther Vandross and fell in love with touring and live events. All three of us here have worked with Cheryl. She's amazing. And we're looking forward to that next week. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our videos. We have had over 492,000 hours of watch time to our channel. And we're very grateful to you have helped us to reach that milestone. Thank you. Subscribe and smash like on all of our videos, please. Also, we are still trying to get our elected officials to listen to us. Right now, we are collateral damage. In other words, our pleas for help are being unheard. We need funding to keep the 12 million people in the live event industry afloat. Many of us are independent contractors, or we own small businesses that have not had income since March. Please go to extendpua.org, wemakeevents.org, NAMM.org, and for mental health and well-being, the roadieclinic.com. Keep the pressure on. Contact your representatives in the House and Senate and remind them about our forgotten industry. Pete, thank you very much. We'll see you in the Q&A section here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, everyone.